So we're here to speak about Fairtrade, its concept, its history, specifically to do with Fairtrade Fortnight, which we're approaching halfway through. What is Fairtrade to begin with?
Well, Fairtrade celebrated its 25th anniversary last year, so it's been around quite a while now. And it's the Fairtrade mark is a guarantee that little chap there. The Fairtrade mark is a guarantee that certain social, environmental, and economic standards have been set. So you know that if you're buying a Fairtrade product, tea, coffee, chocolate, bananas, a wide variety of things, you can be sure that you get the farmers in developing countries, the farmers, producers, they will get a fair wage for their labour. You can be sure that the product's been made according to social environmental standards. In addition to the fair wage, the farmers, the producers will get a fair trade premium, which they decide, their group or cooperative decide how should that be spent, maybe on a local school or whatever. And so it ticks all those boxes, social, economic and environmental. And they're mainly small-scale farmers because they're the ones who are the poorest, the most marginalised, who don't have access to markets or price information. And 82% of all fair trade workers and farmers are these small-scale farming groups.
You mentioned the logo, and you held it up briefly. If you wouldn't mind just pointing it at the camera for us, it's a logo that lots of customers will be pretty familiar with now, I would say. Certainly to be found in most supermarkets, most shops.
Yes, widely. In fact, 1/3 of all bananas now bought in the UK are Fairtrade bananas. Some stores, like the Co-op, you can only buy Fairtrade bananas. There's no other types of bananas there, and it's really gone mainstream in many things, particularly tea, coffee, beverages, chocolate, bananas, but also a far wider range of goods. So yeah, it's becoming more and more mainstream, and it's had year-on-year growth, and that's bananas are the best example, 1/3 of a total.
You mentioned that it's the concept's been around for 25 or 26 years now. Where did it begin and why?
Well, I think in the late 80s there was a widespread global collapse in fact, of the coffee price. And it was in reaction to that produced a lot of poverty, particularly among the small-scale farmers in those developing countries. And so it was a Dutch organisation called Max Havelaar, which in 1989, I think, brought out the world's first fair trade product. It was chocolate from Mexico. And it was sold, marketed in Dutch supermarkets. Max Havelaar was a real Dutch person who in Dutch colonial times stood up for the rights of plantation growers in the Dutch colonies. And so Max Havelaar started that brand. I think it was about 5 years later that in '92 that Fairtrade Foundation got off the ground in the UK. That was a combination of NGOs, CAFOD, Oxfam, Christian Aid, and the Federation of Women Institute and Tradecraft. They got together to form this Fairtrade Foundation, and the UK's first Fairtrade product, I think, was chocolate bar from Brazil, Green and Blacks, in 1994.
You've mentioned a bit about some of the principles behind the concept. Is it as simple as an economic model whereby the money that you pay for the product as the consumer reaches the point of origin?
Yes, there's quite a rigorous auditing check by an independent organisation called FlowCert, which goes out and they independently checks that these social, environmental, economic standards are in place and are reaching the farmers. It's just not going to the bosses in the plantation. It's actually reaching down, and that the fair trade premium is being well spent.
We've spoken about the fact that it's become quite an established model now, but to begin with, what were perceptions like in the community, do you think, and from consumers?
Well, I think there were some doubts when you say a bit more, but certainly I remember at our church, there was the kind of the kitchen mafia was saying, "Oh, this is dishwater. We're not going to have this." But
Is that based on quality or
taste? And maybe in those early days it wasn't to everyone's liking, but that's no longer a valid argument at all. We've got such a range now of coffee, strong, weak, every strength, that but it's good stuff. But I think that was an initial barrier to overcome, which has been successfully overcome. Price was and is, there always is, in a way this is a model which doesn't follow market forces, and so the consumer here in the Isle of Man, yes, has got to pay a few pennies extra for it, but that they have to be persuaded that it's worth it, and it will bear fruit further down the line.